So now we get to the really good bit. We've spent all this time setting up the data we want to collect and then collecting that data. Now we get to analyze it by looking at all of these charts here. Let's look at the first one, community access. There's a series of charts here analyzing all of this. I just wanted to give you some context to help you understand what each chart is telling you. The first chart that we see here is always going to be describing the report itself. So there is one of the forms that we have asks us complete this each time they go into their community. So this is telling us how many times this form has been completed. Over this time span, it's been completed a total number of 12 times, an average number of 0.86 times per day. The next chart that we have is going to be giving us a view of this over time. So each date, how many times was this form filled in? That's for the form itself. After that, all of the charts that we see are going to be addressing each individual question. So this is summarizing the data about where did Gary go. He went to these 3 different places. This is how many times he went to each of these places. Here is a pie chart showing that same information in a pictorial way. And here we have, once again, a time chart. So on each specific day, where did they go? We can click these on and off if we want. We can do the same up here too. For each of these charts, it's going to look similarly to this, which is to say, firstly, there is a chart summarizing all of the data, and then there is a chart summarizing the data as a function of time. There's a couple of other things I wanted to show on this page. One is that we can change the start date and the end date. By default, the start date is going to be the first date for which there is data collected, and the end date is going to be today's date. But I could change these dates to be whatever I wanted. I could change this to be last year, the last month, the last week. I could make it future weeks if I wanted to be, but it would be pretty pointless because there'd be no data collected for those. This way I could compare how one month is going to another and things like this. The last button here, and what I would just change these dates, then click filter by dates, and it's going to show me the different set of data for that. The last thing here is grouping by. At the moment, when we look at these, each day in the time charts gets its own entry here. Each day gets its own entry here. When you start to have a lot of data, when you've got like a year or a few years worth of data, these charts can get very noisy and they can get very busy, and it can actually become quite hard to understand what's going on. So you can group those together by day, week, month, or year. So each bar in the time chart is going to be one of those time units. Let me show you what this looks like if I choose week instead of day. Great. This time it's clumped those time charts together. So this now is describing one full week as opposed to just one day. And it's going to be the same if I do it by month or year, exactly the same as that. Another really helpful way to analyze the data is by the specific staff members themselves. If I click on these staff reports, this is going to give me data about how different staff, how the data they're collecting is different. So the first question here is just, what is the total number of shift reports from each of these staff members? Gives me a big old number there. This is the total number of shift reports in the last 30 days. So over the last month, who has worked with the individual the most? Now, from there, we're going to go into reports on the individual forms. Here we have community access. This is helpful. This is telling me for each shift that Kyle Horan does with Gary Stiles, how many community access reports is he completing? So what this is telling me here is that 89% of the time, Kyle Horan works with Gary. he's taking them out to community. This tells me 100% of the time Blaine is taking them out to the community, but Ian and Bluey, for example, are not. And there could be really good reasons for that. Maybe these guys always do night shifts, for example, but maybe there's not good reasons for that. Maybe there's a good that'd be a good question to follow up with Ian or Bluey. And the final chart or report I want to show off is RRP reporting. When we set up the form before, you maybe remember that one of the questions that we asked ourselves was, is this a restrictive practice? If we have that checked, then that is going to appear in this report here. And this report is just a simple way of seeing exactly how many times this chemical restraint or this restrictive practice was used over that month period. If there's multiple restrictive practices, they'll all be listed here, and each instance of use will be listed here. There is no record of chemical restraint over this period, so there's nothing to show for Gary, but this would be a very handy feature for implementing providers to follow their reporting requirements.